Baki undergoes a medical examination, where Kureha notices that Baki's brain looks different from the brain of an ordinary person because he can see the face of a demon. The next day, Baki was attacked by robbers in an alley, but Kuriyagawa drove them away. He reminds Baki that he has to fight his father. Baki wondered if he really hated his father and if he really deserved revenge for destroying his mother. Thanks to his mother's actions, Baki tries to become the strongest man in the world, and at this moment he realizes what makes him move on. His desire to surpass his father will be a response to his mother's kindness. The Prime Minister comes to Tokugawa, to whom Tokugawa offers 3 billion yen, and asks him for a favor to get approval from the country for a fight between Baki and Yujiro. In the office, the Minister of Defense says that this is very risky, because Yujiro has already attacked one of the previous ministers, and the guard of 150 special forces could not stop him. Also, no weapons can be used against Yujiro, because the United States has entered into an agreement with him. So the destruction of Yujiro will mean the beginning of a war. Yujiro then comes to visit Tokugawa and ask him about his health. This is a rather atypical act for Yujiro, because he himself is ready to destroy anyone in his path. Therefore, Tokugawa began to believe that Yujiro was getting old and was no longer who he was. And for such doubt, Yujiro almost destroyed him. During lunch at a restaurant, Streetum tells the giant about Baki's desire to have dinner with his father. Baki is tired of cooking rice, so he wants Yujiro to cook food for him. And at the same time, they should talk about everyday things like an ordinary family. After this, Baki begins to train with his new teacher, the cockroach. These insects are capable of instantly reaching maximum speed from a state of rest. They do this thanks to the fluid in their body. And realizing this, Baki relaxed his entire body, turning it into liquid, and then was able to make an incredibly fast dash. Yujiro comes to Baki's for breakfast. Baki had already made the coffee and his father actually started drinking it. He tries to provoke his son into a fight and asks why Baki poured him slop, expecting that because of this Baki would lose his temper. But instead he apologized and said he would be more considerate. However, Baki realized that Yujiro was lying and he liked the coffee because he drank it in just 2 sips. So he asks his father to make coffee for him, to which Yujiro replied that he would only do it if he was forced, after which he left the house. Meanwhile, Chiharu, on Hanayama's orders, finds Baki and begins to fight him. Baki easily knocks him out and also says that Chiharu is too weak and should leave. Baki then hears sounds from outside the house and realizes that Chiharu has not gone anywhere. And approaching the entrance, Chiharu breaks through the door and, without allowing Baki to come to his senses, begins to attack him. He managed to get Baki outside, but there Baki knocks him out again. This fight will not end until one of them admits defeat. The fight got to the point where Baki injured his right arm and left leg with his head, but this did not stop Chiharu. Then Baki decided to show him his superiority and fortitude by damaging the fingers on his left hand with his eyes. And he did this thanks to his high-speed dash, which he learned from a cockroach. During this time, Yujiro noticed that he was constantly thinking about his son and that he was always in his heart. He very often sees a dream where Baki has become so strong that Yujiro cannot even touch him with a finger. At this time, Baki himself is talking with Shibukawa about the upcoming battle. Shibukawa tries to dissuade Baki and says that there is nothing shameful in running away from Yujiro, but Baki doesn't think about that. In the evening, Yujiro comes to Baki for dinner. Before starting, Yujiro bowed and only then began to eat. While eating, Yujiro says that Baki eats too much healthy food, which is very bad because in addition to this, you need to eat something that is not healthy. Hearing this, Baki received what he had been missing: practical advice from his father. And this is not to mention the fact that Yujiro adhered to all the rules of etiquette, setting a good example for him. At the end, Yujiro bowed to his son again, thereby thanking him for the food. Because of this, Baki decided to ask his father to wash the dishes. But in response, Yujiro offered to play him rock, paper, scissors. And if Baki wins, he'll wash the dishes. Baki chose a stone, and Yujiro chose scissors, which he used to cut the stone, because scissors can cut anything. As he left, he said that it was his time to treat his son, so he invited him to dinner. However, he did not say where they were going. Therefore, when they met, Yujiro reprimanded his son for not coming in appropriate clothes, to which Baki said that no one taught him the dress code. Although Yujiro was angry, he still invited him to sit at the table, where he began to teach him the rules of conduct in a restaurant. The entire dinner passed quietly, but at the end, Baki asked why Yujiro destroyed his mother. What finally pissed off Yujiro was that Baki grabbed him by the collar. The father took this so that Baki raised his hand against him, and as punishment, Yujiro attacked him. The father tried to punish his hand with a slap, but ended up attacking himself with it, after which he threw his son into the wall. Despite the scale of the battle, it was not a battle, but only a punishment for the insolence of his son. Baki tried to counterattack him, but Yujiro grabbed his head and jumped out of the skyscraper window with him. They landed on the car, and Yujiro threw the tanks onto the sidewalk, saying that this would definitely not have made him go to another world. Baki was indeed alive, but he told his father to pick him up because he himself could not move. It was a deception, and when Yujiro picked him up, Baki stood up and slapped his father. This angered Yujiro even more, and he threw Baki back into the building, where a small fight broke out between them, resulting in Yujiro punishing Baki and using his whip technique to end the evening. After receiving 2 blows, Baki attacked his father with the same technique, but he was able to get rid of the pain of this blow due to the tension of all the other muscles in his body. Meanwhile, Takugawa entered the building and reported that all locals and hotel guests had been evacuated, which means that now nothing prevents them from colliding in full force. Baki makes his dash and rams Yujiro, breaking through the wall. The father appreciated his son's reception and also praised the one who taught him this technique. Yujiro then breaks through the wall with his son, but behind it he sees a huge crowd of people who have come to watch the fight. The crowd had gathered here because the incident at the hotel had been covered in the news. And who could miss the greatest fight on earth between the strongest people, who are also father and son? Yujiro suggested that Baki finish for today. Then Baki suspected that Yujiro was afraid of embarrassing himself in front of the public. These words shocked Yujiro, and he froze while Baki struck him. The attacks were so strong that Yujiro started to see red liquid for the first time in a long time. Baki decided to repeat his jerk, but this time it had no effect and Yujiro threw him back. After this, Yujiro launched several more powerful attacks, but thanks to Baki's strong fighting spirit, he was able to get up and continue the fight, during which Baki realized that his attacks had no effect on him. And then he decided to take the stance in which Pickle saw a dinosaur. Yujiro himself constantly thought about dinosaurs, and he was always interested in knowing how strong they were. And now, in the place where Baki stood, he sees only a huge dinosaur. With his strength, Baki moved Yujiro from his place and rammed the car with him. Yujiro praised him, but said that it was just an imitation. After which he took the fighting stance that he had just invented and began to imitate himself, because Yujiro is the most powerful creature he knows. Baki says that this form is ideal, but the strength of the fighting form is not in its appearance, because the purpose of the form is to be useful in battle. Baki threw a quick punch that nearly caused Yujiro to fall. For such an attack, Yujiro began to praise him again, and even wanted to stroke him, causing strong emotions in Baki. Throughout his years, the only thing Baki lacked was his father's sincere pride. Due to his excitement, Baki lost his control, but still managed to refuse him, because they came here to fight. Since his son refused to be petted, Yujiro began squeezing and petting him at the same time. Thus, he shows that power allows you to do what you want. After which he threw his son aside and began to attack him. Baki was weakened, and Yujiro was ready to finish him off, but at the last moment Pickle, who had been watching the fight all this time, intervened. For this, Baki attacked him and scolded him, because you can't interfere in someone else's fight. Immediately after this, Yujiro threw Baki away again and tried to finish him off again. But at the last moment, Baki managed to get up, and he invited his father to have a duel, which Eugene did not refuse. However, he introduces a new rule. In normal duels, opponents will look for trigger points in each other, but Yujiro will simply count down 5 seconds and then strike. Baki decided not to pull his hands out of his pockets, but instead lower his entire body, as a result of which he was able to kick him in the face and then completely took his hand into a combat grip. It turned out to be too easy for Baki, so he started yelling at his father not to give up and continued the fight. Hearing this, Yujiro raised his right hand and punched the asphalt with it to use it as a support. Yujiro says that his life is boring and the only one who can entertain him is Baki, So Yujiro decides to awaken his true power in Baki by launching a series of powerful attacks. Then Baki realized there was nothing more he could do to him. But at the last moment, the spirit of Hanma Yujiro's father, appeared behind Baki. The grandfather instilled hope in Baki because he was able to defeat his father. A long time ago, during the battle for Okinawa, the small island was destroyed by the cannons of ships and planes, and the United States dropped more than 1,000 tons of TNT on it. And all this in order to destroy Hanma Yujiro, who was on it. To destroy it, the American High Command authorized the use of a nuclear warhead. But Yujiro destroyed all the soldiers and the commander-in-chief of this operation. After that, the whole world began to say that Yujiro defeated America. Seeing his father, Yujiro remembered one of his techniques. He grabbed Baki and started swinging him like nunchucks. Due to the strong centrifugal force, red liquid from all over the body began to rush to the head, and red liquid began to pour out of all the cracks on Baki's face. After which Yujiro began to use Baki as his sword and began to destroy everything around him. Even despite this situation, Baki was able to learn to dodge the fragments and objects that Yujiro attacked him against. Having gotten comfortable, Baki stood in front of his father and presented him with a newly made iron samurai from the rubble, which he collected while his body was being crushed by cars. Baki began to attack his father, and not a single attack from Yujiro could hit him. Yujiro says that he traveled all over the world looking for opponents, but none of them could even come close to satisfying him. In response, Baki says that children play with toys until they finally break them. This means that Yujiro has become a toy for him. At this point, Kazu intervenes, saying that their fight is too boring because they are just talking instead of destroying each other. However, in response to this, Yujiro thanks Kazu for helping Baki become stronger, after which they rush to fight again. Yujiro used the hug technique he used on his mother, and first he burst his membranes and then damaged his ribs. Baki was unconscious and Yujiro was about to leave, but Baki's fighting spirit did not fade, and he continued to attack his father, showing his determination. Seeing this, Yujiro understood everything and began to prepare dinner for Baki. Baki liked the food his father prepared, but he oversalted it. Baki noticed that his father was starting to worry, and therefore saved him from the bad opinion of the crowd by turning over the table with food. According to Yujiro, only the strongest in the world can make him cook dinner, and therefore he passes on the title of the strongest to him. But since Baki's hearing had not yet recovered, he simply did not hear his words and therefore admitted his defeat. As a result, Yujiro handed over his title of the strongest in the world, and Baki handed over the victory to him. If you want to continue, then write about it in the comments.